Hey everyone, this is Dr. Darian Parker, and I'm excited to be providing a little bit of a workout here for you guys, especially all you runners getting ready for the virtual 5K. I was a previous runner, my life a collegiate track and field athlete, so I know a lot about working with runners. And one of the big deficiencies with runners, especially, is in hip and shoulder mobility endurance. So today we're going to take you through a quick, let's say 15 to 20-minute workout that you can do that'll get you ready and activate your muscles, get ready to have a great running performance for that. So again, hip and shoulder mobility and endurance we're working on today. Today I have my wife with me, Michelle Parker, who is going to be demonstrating the exercises, and I'm going to be explaining a little bit about them as we go along. So we're going to jump right into it. We're not going to delay. We're going to start out first with our hips, our hip flexors, okay? We're going to start out with a hip flex and a slide. So right leg hip flex, and we're going to slide over just as you see right here with my wife. So she's going to continuously slide over just like that, flex her hip. You also see that her toe is dorsiflexed, so it's pointed upwards there, and her foot is being placed right underneath her hips. So she's going to turn around, do the same exact leg for that. Now, one of the biggest reasons why we're doing a lot of hip-based work, one, because that's where we're getting a lot of our ground reaction force. When we put our feet right underneath our hips there, we get more propulsion with that. So we're going to do the other side. So she's just going right to the other leg. Okay, so again, hip flex 90 degrees at the hip and the knee, and continuous sliding with that. Now, with the hip work that we're doing, when I went to college as a collegiate track and field athlete, I knew a little bit about working with our hips and the importance with running and strengthening and having endurance in that area. But when I got to college, it was a big part of what we did. So we would actually spend about an hour working on warming up using these hip-based exercises and a variety of other things to do with that. So we had that. That's 4 times on our hip flex. Now we're going to do is a march. You're probably very familiar with a march, just marching up and down. You may have seen in many different places, but we're going to do this moving laterally, moving to the side. So Michelle's going to flex one hip, then flex the other, and then move to the side. So go for it. Flex, and we're going to move to the side while she does up, up, and over. Now, another version of that you can do is also where you're going to flex your hip, slide, then flex the other one. You could flex, slide, and one at a time. You could also do it 1, 2, then slide, just like Michelle's doing. So why don't you show them the other way, where your flex is more continuous and moving to the side. There you go. So there's another version of that as well. So she's going to do that again 4 times. All you guys want all these to be 4 times. So down, back, down, back. So what are the things you might be wondering, what's the distance that I should use for doing this? Generally 10 to 15 yards is pretty good for this. Going 4 times, you'll really feel the fatigue within your hip flex region here, and we'll continue with that. So today what we're going to work on is not only hip flexion, we're going to do hip extension, hip adduction, and hip abduction. Right now we're focusing on hip flexion, the front of the leg on the inguinal crease right here. Michelle's coming to the finish of that. So we're going to work on some hip rotation is next. So with our hip rotation, we're going to flex the hip and then rotate it out, slide over. So we're going to flex, rotate, slide. Michelle's doing that next for you here. So hip flexion, hip rotation, bring your knee up, slide it out. There we go. Awesome. So again, we're putting together that hip complex. A lot of people, they focus a lot of their work in their midsection for the abdominal muscles. But we're going to focus not only on that, but our hip complex, which encompasses especially our hip flexors, hip abductors, hip adductors, hip extensors. So all of our movements are based off of that, helping you to provide more endurance when you're running there. So she's going to continue to do that. When she gets back, she's going to switch to her other leg to start 3 and 4 with that there. Awesome. Again, 4 times on this, really important. And as you get better at this, you can lengthen the distance, or you can actually lengthen the number of repetitions, and here being the lengths that we're doing for that. So again, we're focusing on hip flex, hip rotation. One of the biggest things about exercise is making sure that there is a progression. All right, so a lot of times we don't want exercise to be aimless, or that what we're doing is just a movement without any real goal or specific aspect to improvement. A lot of exercise can be that way. We want to have something that builds on top of each other. So with this, we just did our hip flex, then we did our hip flex both legs. Now we're doing hip flex, hip rotation, adding in some hip abduction there. Now what we're going to do next thing is we're going to do hip abduction with knee extension. So what that means is we're going to increase the force arm. Anytime you increase the force arm or the lever, you make something longer, you have to produce more force to create that movement, which then increases the intensity of the exercise. So in this one, we're going to swing our leg out to the side and extend our knee and then slide. All right, Shelly, want to do that? Leg swings out and she slides over. Again, we've lengthened the lever. Look at that lever as all the way from your hip flexor or in the head of your humerus, femur area there, all the way down to your toes. Instead of flexing the knee, we're extending it. Anytime you extend that force arm of that lever, you need more force to produce that. It makes it harder, very simply put. So she turned around, doing the same leg, swinging her leg out, moving to the side for that. So not only are we creating a progression, but we're increasing the intensity on that progression. Now she's going to move to the other leg when she does that there. All right, you see that? So we're not going towards the midline being the middle of the body. We're not doing that, not yet. We're just focusing on going straight out to the side, abducting our hips, and then extending the knee. She will do that. She has one more time coming back. The next thing we have coming up is we're going to actually add a swing to it, more mobility. So we're going to cross the midline and do a swing in and out, or what I call adduction swing, abduction swing. So this one, you need to be fluid. One of the hardest concepts in exercise is kind of combining being rigid and also being fluid. So on this exercise, we're going to be swinging in and out all in one motion. Swinging in and out, we're going to swing, adduct, swing out, abduct, slide. So swing in, swing out, slide over. Michelle's going to do that exercise there. She's going to swing in, swing out, and slide over. Fantastic. So she's going to continue that. And you see the difference there. She's swinging her leg inside and then outside. Adduction, abduction. So what have we done so far? Again, we've done hip flex, single leg, hip flex, double. We've done hip flex, hip rotation, and then we've done leg straight out to the side with knee extension, hip abduction. Now we've added hip adduction and abduction for that. Again, your workouts should make sense. They should have a sense of flow to them. They should not be aimless. They should have a sense of purpose for that. With anything in life, you don't want to be aimless. You want to have a goal. You want to have a way to know that you're on the right track. So again, this is increasing intensity. We've increased the force arm both in adduction and abduction, which makes this exercise particularly much more difficult. Also, you have the balance aspect of it as well. So she's continuing to do that. We're going to add in another swing exercise that'll be coming very soon, which is a swing forward, swing backwards. Now, what we're doing right now is more of your frontal plane. A frontal plane is anything that's moving kind of laterally with that. We're going to go into our frontal plane, it's more flexion, extension. We're still going to extend that knee so that we have that force arm that is much longer, which makes it a little bit harder here. So we're going to swing forward, swing backward. Now we're adding in hip extension. So we have hip flexion, we have knee extension, we swing back, hip extension, okay? So we're going to swing forward, swing backwards, step forward, okay? So our next one here. So we're going to swing forward, swing backwards, step forward. You'll notice in everything that we do here is constant movement. A lot of exercise is done in a stationary way. It's done in the same place. Our goal here is to make sure that you're getting constant movement while you're getting ready for your run. You're not staying in place. We want to mimic as much as possible the movement that you're going to be doing for that. Again, so she's swinging forward, backwards, or she's hip flexing, knee extension, to hip extension for that. Again, we're encompassing the entire aspect of the hip complex, which is really important to not just focus on one thing. We're creating endurance and creating mobility with that. So as you see coming up here soon, we're going to start adding the upper body into it, especially the shoulder complex, which we talked about. The reason why we're focusing especially on the hips and the shoulders here is because these are your two most mobile joints. You're getting a tremendous amount of laxity and mobility in those joints. And anytime you have a lot of mobility, a lot of times you sacrifice stability in that joint. People often get injured in the shoulder joint, hips, knees. You start going down, it's a chain, the anterior posterior chain for that. So we want to make sure they're creating continuous pliability, flexibility, range of motion in that joint, while also creating endurance as well. So what we're going to do, we've done a couple of those swing-based exercises. Now we're going to focus just on the hip extension aspect of it. Okay, so we're going to swing backwards, step backwards. Moving backwards creates a different feel for the exercise. Now you're not seeing where you're going, so a little more proprioception with that. Swing backwards, step backwards. All right, do that next one here. And so we're going to swing backwards, step backwards. Continuous there. Again, it's okay if you lose your balance a little bit. These are probably exercises you haven't done before. For most people, this is not a regular part of exercising routine, but it's a very critical part. I know when I work out, I always add in at least one day a week of mobility and stability with that, making sure that I'm having good range of motion in my hips and my shoulders. Okay, so one of the things we're going to do as Michelle comes back is we're going to add in the shoulder complex with that, and we're going to focus on rotation. We're going to focus on anterior flexion, okay, rear deltoid movements. We're going to do upward rotation, downward rotation of the scapula. So in that same exercise, she's going to swing back and reach your arms out, slide backwards, swing, reach, back. All right, go for it. And this could also be done moving forward as well. Arms coming out, good, excellent. So one other way that can be very powerful with this is if you can start from standing, moving down. Instead of just always standing, you can create levels to this, of a standing level, mid-level, and then getting to groundwork. I love doing groundwork, especially for hip work. It's really effective. We're not going to really do that today. We're going to focus on standing up based exercises, but you can take this a leveling approach to going down for doing this. It's really effective for that. So Michelle's coming back through that. You're going to see she continues, arms out. That's okay. She stuck the landing. It's good. And she's going to step back, continuous with that. So one of the other things, I'm going to have her stop here, and we're going to do some more shoulder-based activities. So one thing we're going to do, arms straight down. We're in a downward rotation of our scapula. Upward rotation, hip flex, back down. Upward rotation, hip flex, back down. Okay, going to have you do that. And then we're going to create progression with this by going down a little bit lower. So we're going to add in lower body squat with this, and you'll see the difference here. Anytime we increase the length of our body, again, remember the force arm aspect. When you increase a lever, okay, my body is also a lever. When I make that lever taller, I am changing the intensity of the exercise here, okay, for that. So when I make things taller or I increase the lever here, it becomes more difficult. And I'm changing my center of gravity, which becomes higher, which my stability becomes a little more compromised, which also makes it a little bit more intense with that. So exercise is not often all about new exercises. The progression is generally the same exercise with different variations on it. So Michelle, the next thing we're going to do, we're going to do the same thing, except we're going to add a squat to it. So you're going to come all the way down, what I like to call a base squat, which is you're coming all the way down to the ground, where you're going to have on your toes, basically, heels off the ground. Arms come up, upward rotation, stand up, slide over. Downward rotation of the scapula. Down, bring it up, stand up, slide over. Okay, she'll start here. Let me show you that. So she's coming all the way down here. There we go. Arms up, stand up, slide over. Now, for some people, this may be a very difficult exercise. If you're not used to having the mobility and endurance in your hips, quadriceps, hamstrings, the whole deal there, doing this base squat can be very difficult. So you can modify that going down 3/4, arms straight out, stand up and over. You can come down, upward rotation as far as you're comfortable with, slide over, okay? What we don't want is your hands up and you're dipping your head down, putting in poor body position there. So what Michelle's doing is what we're looking for, the end product. But you can vary that in different ways for that. So again, as we have gone from the ground all the way up to the top, we've created more intensity, we've decreased or changed the center of gravity to make it harder. So again, having a good understanding, physics, biomechanics, motor learning, helps to create intensity in an exercise without having to actually create a bunch of new exercises for doing that with it. So again, she's doing, right now she brings her arms down, downward rotation of the scapula. As she brings her arms up, upward rotation of scapula for that. Actually, it could be the opposite. I might be messing it up. Sorry about that. But you're rotating the scapula up and down, okay, creating mobility for that. So another one we're going to do, we're going to come back to our lower body here. So we're going to hip flex, hip rotation, step backwards. Again, creating different directions, moving backwards here for that creates a little bit more intensity because you're not able to see the direction here. So you got to have better feel. Hip flex, hip rotation, step backwards, keep your body square, okay? All right, hip flex, hip rotation, swing it around. There you go. You notice how she's keeping her body square. She's not turning her body completely with that. We want to focus on that hip region, not the other regions of your body with that. Okay, so hip flex, rotation, step backwards. Fantastic. Good. Now these are all exercises here that can be done at this pace. However, they also can be done with a different pace, meaning that you can increase tempo. Tempo was one of the most important concepts to making an exercise harder. Tempo is increasing the speed or the pace at which things are going. So she could speed up the exercise and do that. She could even start skipping with this exercise, which creates a lot of coordination, heavily increases the cardiovascular component of it. We do the other side, and it makes it way harder to do that. Again, it's a progression. So you could do that moving forward. You can do it backwards. A lot of times you can do a lot of these exercises laterally as well. As soon as you add the skip component, you're heavily increasing the cardiovascular aspect of it as well. So while this is mobility and big time, you can drastically increase the endurance as well, depending on the intensity that you want to do with that for that. So she's going to finish that up. We're going to bring our arms back in. We're also going to add in some rotation. We've done a lot of frontal plane exercises. All right, so we're moving laterally. We've done some flexion extension, and now we're going to do rotation, which is very important. Is often one of the hardest aspects to do in any program is adding rotation. We're not used to rotating. We're very much a flexion extension based society, if you will. So what we're going to do is we're going to do that same exercise as we come down into our squat, our base squat, rotating the scapula, down, up, and as we come up, we're going to rotate. Now, what we're going to do is we're going to keep our arms up as we stand. This is also a plank when we're doing this, okay? We're going to come down, raise the arms up, rotate our hips, back forward, and then step. We're in our plank position, okay? So you see, this can become way more complex over time. It can encompass almost limitless variations of the exercise here. It's just understanding that your body moves in different planes of motion, different dimensions, and incorporating those different dimensions as you're doing it there. So as you see what Michelle's doing there, she's going into our base squat position, front raise, the shoulders, her scapula is rotating, then she's rotating at her spine as well for that. So there's a lot of things happening here. So the focus is that we're doing things from simple to complex. Often what happens when you're doing exercise programs is participants start with complex exercises and they're not ready for them. And that's where a lot of injury happens. So we want to focus on doing simple things, showing this progression of going simple to more complex. This will be considered a much more complex exercise, whereas the first exercise that we did, which is your hip flex, right leg hip flex slide, a more simple based exercise for that. Yeah, these can be done anywhere. You do not have to have a bunch of equipment to have an effective workout. Does it help? Certainly it helps. Having any external resistance is going to increase the intensity of the exercise. But the important thing is that you are taking your time and going through the proper progression. You don't drive a car the first day you get in it and become great at driving the car. You learn the basics of doing that, where the accelerator is, where the brake is, how to use the steering wheel, understanding where people are around you, driving aspects. Then it becomes more complex. We need to approach exercise the same exact way with that. So we're going to come back, we're going to do another exercise just to give you something a little bit different, but still more complex, but a little bit, still more simple, but more complex. So we're going to swing twice, just the hip flexors. We're going to swing 1, 2, slide over. So I'll have you do that, Michelle. So we're going to swing twice, just double swing, just adding a little more intensity to it, and then sliding over, adding the movement as well. Again, so you can start this with just one swing. And over time, you can add 2 swings or more swings. You can also do this skipping, which makes it really challenging for that. So everything you're doing on this is helping to improve hip mobility, hip endurance, also stability of the joints, so you have better performance. A lot of these drills are often done, especially in running, before you exercise, but you could also do them after as well. And especially during that time, you'll be much more pliable as your body temperature is raised, more blood going through your system, so it'll be a lot, maybe even easier to do that. But it's a great way to get prepped for running your race and be able to be a little bit more effective for that. And that's where a lot of our new research really is from. We're no longer doing this static stretching. For anybody looking at this and you're spending time, your hands on the wall, on the ground stretching, I'm not saying stretching's not good, but what I am saying is the results, research-wise, are very mixed. And even most recently, it's really dynamic-based, progressive mobility, stability, endurance is going to be the best bet for you before you even get started with what you're doing, or just starting with your run as well. So paying attention to what's happening out there in science is really important from qualified professionals. So that should give you a good idea of some mobility, hip and shoulder mobility based exercises that you can do easily at your home, before you race, wherever you are on the planet, and you will be ready to go for your run. I highly recommend that you do this beyond just your running. Add it into your normal workout routine several times a week, at least once a week with that. And I think you're going to see a huge change in your range of motion, your mobility, and stability of your joints. Thanks a lot. I'm Dr. Darian Parker, and have a good race.